February 1st, 2025. Well, a lot of crazy stuff's been happening lately, including these two well-noted airplane crashes and the helicopter crashing into the airliner in D.C. and of course the one that's just occurred in Philadelphia, just a plane crashing on takeoff. And this is gaining a lot of news. However, the real bit it's obscuring the big news, which is this tariff plan that Trump has now put into effect, and on Canada, Mexico, and I guess China. Well, the one that gets to me is the one I've been saying earlier. I don't see the rationale of putting tariffs on Canada. I don't see how that really helps any, unless there are corresponding tariffs exist from Canada, which I don't think there are. And so this will be an interesting development. Of course, the bigger ones probably will be the ones. China's hard to figure what that will do. The Mexico, I always see that as being largely about the border and the cartels and the fentanyl and all the legal aliens and all that sort of thing, and the fact that this has been facilitated by Mexico, if nothing else, by doing nothing and letting it happen. And so I've always thought this is sort of a pressure tactic. I'm beginning to think this is more than a pressure tactic, and I think the problem I have is that, well, let's look at it this way. Of course, I voted for Trump and support him very much. If anybody's followed my videos would know this. And I support almost everything he's doing, most everything. I mean, certainly what he's doing on the border. I think he's putting some innovative appointments up. I certainly like Kash Patel for FBI. I think that looks interesting. Rubio, Secretary of State, is good, and so forth. I mean, and of course, he's trying to cut back on wasteful spending. I think some of the executive orders will have some court battles, as I had predicted earlier. They will, so that's but of course, tariffs are a tool that can be used, I think, very effectively at times to protect strategic industries in the country. There's certain things that a major nation just has to be able to do internally, or they would be incredibly vulnerable. I mean, in fact, one of the things that's kind of kept Russia in going on in their war with Ukraine is the fact that they do have a lot of internal depth and ability to provide the basic necessities internal to their country. And of course, that's what thing. And so, like the U.S. needs to be able to do the same thing. And of course, that's true. But I mean, when you're looking at things like the Canadians, I mean, that's and it's sort of weird. I mean, is this all planned to really bring them in as a 51st state, which I think is a very bad idea from the Republican Party, because it'd be like bringing in another California practically, especially if it's one state. I guess if it's two states, but even then, you still have, I think, ultimately, I think they would support the Democrat Party more, I think. So I don't see that as at all a useful idea. And so we'll have to see kind of where this is going. But at any rate, I have a few thoughts. I think this, of all the things he's doing, I think this is the one that's really kind of a real problem. And I think it's a problem for the Republican Party and for him in a way. I mean, of course, he never has to face election again. So from that point of view, however, if he wants to be the guy that didn't do the great things he's talking about, but actually undermines his own effort, that's another issue. Because, well, the thing is, here's the deal. The two issues he really ran on that were very, very effective. One was the border, and the other was inflation. And the fact of the matter is that this is, I think, inherently inflationary. I can't see how it can't be. And I'll try to explain why I think that's the case. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. You can subscribe and, of course, click the bell for notifications, or you can follow me on Rumble, the address in the description below. Yeah, so, okay, and then this may be a little bit annoying to some people, but let's look at a few facts here. For instance, one thing that he's stated is that the issue of cars that are made in Canada and imported, okay? But I've looked at the numbers on this, and in reality, on a per capita basis, the Canada produces about the same number of cars as we do. And so basically, and what you'll find is there are American companies and other known companies, the Japanese companies, particular, that make cars in Canada. A lot of them are in Ontario, okay, which ironically is one of the more conservative parts of Canada. So we may be helping the Liberal Party up there by this, for instance, um, which I don't think is what we should be wanting to do either. But okay, let's look at this. So I looked at the cars. There's like 15 different makes of cars that I found listed that are being made in Canada. You know, and when you look at them, you know, it's this Chrysler will be hit pretty hard. Several Chrysler brands. There's some Ford, you know, some GM, some Toyota, I think some Honda, all being made up there. And because remember, some of the Japanese companies they make cars in the United States too. So what that will do is certain makes, certain models will be hit by a 25% tariff. Okay, and other models of the same company's cars will not be hit with a tariff. Okay, now look at it the other way around. Now, Canada buys these other makes of these cars, I'm sure, because Canada doesn't have a lot of indigenous car, you know, brands. So what you're going to be left with is, okay, they'll either be left to, I guess, these other cars may become more affordable in Canada so that they'll be sold in Canada, and then we won't buy those models anymore. We'll buy the models made here. And the way the production's set up, you know, you're not going to change that overnight. I mean, entire production plants and designs are going to take a while. And what are we going to do? Move all these particular makes back in the United States? Then, I mean, okay, then Canada will do what with those plants? Just make other models up there, and in other words, we'll make the production less efficient, and we'll end up basically paying more for cars because we'll be duplicating production lines in Canada and the United States. It seems like that's where it might end up. Now, on other issues, a lot of what Canada sells is natural resources. Okay. And I mean, talking lumber and all kinds of minerals and stuff like that. Okay, that's a big thing they do. Now, and he's apparently only going to put a 10% tariff, at least the last I heard, on the oil. Again, even that will increase oil prices, right? Increase prices at the pump ultimately, right? Because we're not holding back on producing oil here right now, in spite of all the propaganda. What Biden has really been doing is restricting future production of oil. Fields that have not been developed yet are being held back, and Trump's rescinding those orders. Okay, so over time, that means exploration and leases can go forward in those areas, and in time, they will find oil and start producing it. But it's not going to happen in the year 2025. There's going to be no new oil out of those areas produced in 2025 or even 2026. And of course, the next big election is 2026. And so what I'm getting at is, okay, so gas prices won't go down; they'll probably go up. And so with the 25% on tariff on Mexico, I don't know if he's going to have 10 for their oil. I don't know, but if he does, I mean that will go up too because we get oil from them. And a lot of oil from Alaska, I think, really goes to Asia anyhow. And why? Because, well, that we don't really have the oil ports sufficient, I don't think, on the West Coast, unless somebody knows different than I do, to utilize it. And otherwise, you'd have to, these tankers are too big to go through the Panama Canal, regardless of who owns it. They'd have to go around the South American Cape and come back to into now the Gulf of America to actually unload the stuff, or other facilities on the coast. So in other words, which is very inefficient. I mean, so, you know, I think undoubtedly the price of gasoline is going to go up. Furthermore, there's ideas that are coming out that we're going to put some kind of sanctions on Iran. That hasn't happened yet, but if it does, and Iranian oil comes off the market, and if our threats of sanctions against everybody are sufficient to make everybody not buy it, that means they're going to have to go to other sources that are already existing, and of course that'll drive the prices up even more. And OPEC has currently said, no, we're not increasing production. And I mean, they may change their mind. I don't know. So, you know, this is, you know, what I'm looking at is that, so gas prices go up. And also, I don't think there's the materials that we're getting from Canada. I don't think there's readily available alternative resources. Over time, yes, they can be developed, but they're not going to be developed in the first quarter or second quarter of uh, of 2025. I don't think, and so people have to pay more for them. So the manufactured costs are going to be basically pushed on the consumer, probably mostly. Maybe the companies will lose profits, in which case the stocks will fall, which will be bad for the market. And so you see what I mean, and that has an effect on people's retirement funds and the annuities that people are relying on for that. And so you're getting into a situation where now I don't think it's going to be a calamity, but I think that, for instance, the Fed probably will because of higher inflation, will not be cutting interest rates, and that means the price of houses will, in terms of affordability, the actual monthly payments will be higher, which will cut down on people being able to afford housing, for instance. So, in other words, this at the most, I don't think will be catastrophic in the near term at all. I think we can get by with it. It can be, absorbed into the flow of things. But basically, an improving trend that we had is going to actually quit. It's not going to quit improving. It's going to get a little bit worse, in my opinion. And so I may be wrong here, and if he's right, he'll turn out to be a genius. And I guess we won't have to pay as many taxes because of this. We'll have money to have no tax on tips and all that stuff because we'll get money from these tariffs. The other aspect is how will Canada and China respond to this? Mexico, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, the normal thing Mexicans would do, we put Mexicans out of work and it increases pressure on the border. But since we're beefing up border security, perhaps we don't have to worry about that. Maybe once we get it in place, once we get the wall really fully finished and we're putting federal troops down there. So maybe we can stop that problem from happening. On the other hand, then we might have an unstable situation on the southern border, which isn't good, but I don't know. I mean, that's a trade-off because to some degree, you want to have a certain amount of prosperity developing in Mexico. On the other hand, you don't want to have your auto manufacturing job go to Mexico. I agree with that. As Ross Perot said, that you'll have a giant sucking sound if you open everything up to them. But I thought that, as I recall, that in the first term, President Trump actually negotiated the so-called USMCA, which is touting as such a great deal. And now we're essentially going far radically beyond this, it seems like. The other possibility is, and it's possible that what will happen is that, for instance, Canada may just put tariffs on our products. So if you want to buy those particular brands of cars I mentioned, you'll have to pay 25% more. So the Canadians will have to pay more for their cars. And I don't know what they're going to do because they have high taxes anyhow. So maybe the extra tax they'll have Canadian rebates for buying Canadian-made cars. I don't know. I have no idea what they're going to do, and maybe they'll just cave in like a bunch of wimps. I don't know what'll happen. I'll leave that up to them to decide. But the Chinese may be a different thing. In fact, if we get too economically tough on China, they may simply decide that it's time to go ahead and invade Taiwan now before we actually build all these super weapons that we have under development. I mean, we're working on a lot of things that might be a big problem for that invasion, in a few years once they get deployed, right? The NGAV fighter plane that's being proposed, the FAXX plane. I hear there's a drone project that's coming along, and a variety of other things, and military sales that we're providing to the Taiwanese. So maybe they'll say, look, we're going to get embargoed anyhow. Let's go ahead and face a total trade boycott, and just like Russia has, and roll the dice. I doubt that one will happen, but you never know. I mean, at some point, we threatened the entire BRICS nations with a 100% tariff. Well, at some point, maybe they'll decide it's just time to get it on. I mean, this is, I think it's just too brash personally, but then that's just me. But like I said, most everything else he's doing, not everything, but I've heard one today that may backfire a little bit too. And that's the problem. I think a lot of these things, this is just him, pure and simple. He's just going on his whim, and it's not being really adequately staffed, I don't think, and thought out. It's just let's do this, let's do this, let's do this other thing, and the consequences of some of these things are not really being appropriately considered. And so the result is there may be a backlash coming. That's the thing I'm concerned about more than anything else. I am concerned about the 2026 elections because, I mean, if we lose the Congress in that election, then the whole thing is going to be pretty well stymied. And I'm a little bit worried also that at some point, for instance, I'm seeing a potential conflict that he will try to fire the Federal Reserve Board. And the problem with that is that will definitely impact the stock market very negatively, maybe even a crash. And the other aspect of it is that the courts will probably put an injunction. They'll go to court and they'll put an injunction on that. And I don't think he's going to get any relief at all, at least in any of the D.C. courts, which is probably where the issue will be fought out. So it comes down, will the Supreme Court really back that? And my bet is they don't. And now, the turmoil will occur during the period in which the judicial process plays out will probably damage the economy some, and will rebound against Republicans across the board and his popularity, which is very high right now. But I mean, I think right now people are being so dazzled. I agree with what Dan Bongino is saying, that it's almost like I'll put my words for it would be, it's like a blitzkrieg. He's moving so fast that the opposition can't put up a defensive line because every time they try to put one, he's already passed it up and he's going further. So, I mean, and like I said, he's on a rampage, but I think there can be a consequence of rampages. And so we'll have to see how that all plays out. And, I know that this tariff thing is the one that gets me. Everything else I kind of think I'm more or less on board with. But that one, well, that's just me. We'll see what happens. But I'm thinking that the consequences may not be what he thinks they're going to be. Because the environment is a little bit different than it was. He had some minor tariffs that were put on during the first term, and they didn't do a whole lot of damage to anything. In fact, they were probably helpful to protect the steel industry and the like. But, I mean, another thing I would point out is, do we actually have the workforce to make up for everything we're getting from all these other outfits? Because, I mean, particularly if they stop buying stuff from us in retaliation, we'd, I mean, we might, I don't know, it's hard to know, but I'm just thinking we're pretty close to full employment right now, 4.3% unemployment. There's not a big unemployment problem now. I mean, somewhere around that, it's generally considered full employment. If you get much below that, you start having labor shortages. And then you have people competing, and then prices go up, which is also inflationary. But right now, it's about the right level to keep inflation coming down and keep most people being able to find a job if they want one. And so that's kind of the way I see that one. Well, anyway, I'll be wrapping this one up for now. Let's see what you think about it. I suppose I'm going to get some blowback on this one, and I understand. Because, but I do think for myself, and as I said, I've been pretty much supporting everything, certainly what he's doing on the border and a lot of that stuff and all these appointments, but we'll see how this one works out. Anyway, all for now. I'll be posting this on, of course, YouTube and Rumble as always, and the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. So we'll be following in the days ahead to see what does happen, because we don't know what the reaction is going to be. Maybe it will be nothing. I don't know. We'll see.